welcome everybody to, I think this is episode 3 of the Numbers Talk. And today's episode will be just a tiny bit different because today I have somebody on that is not entirely sure of her number. You are, what's your name?
I'm Chairra Nicole.
So this is Chairra, and we were just off mic before we started talking about how long we thought we knew each other, and we're coming up 3 years in the fall where we first met. I was a yoga teacher down at Spray Lakes before Kyle and I bought the studio, and you would come there with Kaya, right? Yeah, and so that's where we got to know each other, and then you came on the retreat that Marnie and Sheena and I did in January of 2018, and then I think we've just been friends since then.
Yeah, then I just followed you here.
And then you were in our teacher training with Fireweed, and that's where we introduced the Enneagram to our teacher trainers. And so that's my first question for you. Was that your first introduction to the Enneagram?
It wasn't. You had done an alchemy exchange back in January, about a year and a half ago.
Right.
And that is when I really got into the Enneagram and started reading a ton of books on it and researching, just trying to dig into it.
Figure it all out.
Figure it all out.
And so you remind me of myself a little bit because I've said before that it took me over a year to find my number. And I started doing the work from thinking I was that number, and then things just didn't feel 100% right for me until I found my instinct. And then I was able to point in a different direction and go, oh, I'm not a 9, I'm a 4. So what has been your experience up until right now, us sitting across from me today and you saying, help, I don't know my number?
I think I initially went in and was like, I'm this one number. And I only really read about that number because it made the most sense. But the more and more I've been reading about it, the childhood wound doesn't really make sense. Some of the things that happen in stress and in health don't really make sense. And so I'm just back into it, taking it going, am I this way? Am I that way? Where am I?
So you're a little bit confused on where you might be headed these days.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do with Chairra today is I'm going to do what's called an Enneagram interview. And this is actually my first time to do it in such a formal way, and I'm really excited to do this. I'm going to be following the Chestnut Paya's interview questions, and they're really specific to each of the 9 numbers. And we're going to start with 8 and go around 8, 9, 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way around. So I'm going to ask her a series of questions based on each and every number. And that way, and I'm going to be taking some notes too. And that way we can for sure eliminate some right out of the top. You probably even know some that you're definitely not. And that's something to really watch, is like, what number am I not? Or even, what triad do I not live in? Remember, there's the heart triad, the head triad, and the gut or the instinctual triad. So oftentimes we can rule those out right away, and then we can more focus in on maybe 3 or 2. So my intention today is to just help guide you. My job is to not find her number. The way it's been put to me before is that if I tell you what your number is, then I rob you of the journey and I rob you of the work. And it is a journey. We don't just, I kind of like that it's not that easy to find our numbers for some of us, because it actually gives the Enneagram, I think, more credibility, that there is more depth to it than just, like a typology test that you would take in the back of Cosmo magazine or something. There's some richness and some ancientness to this whole tool that gives us a really good learning for who we're not more than who we are. Okay, so our first question is going to be, how assertive are you?
How assertive am I? I would say if it falls within my value set, I can be quite assertive.
Okay. How easy or hard is it for you to say what's on your mind?
It can be difficult.
Okay.
It can be difficult. Yeah.
Even with people that you live with?
I think if it's people I trust, I'm free, and I will say anything, right? And whatever comes to mind, and I can be a talker, but if it's someone that I'm not trusting of or I'm not sure of, I probably won't say anything.
Okay. Is it easy for you to dominate the situation?
No.
Okay.
No.
The next question was, what does that look like? But all right. And when you're working with others to get something done, do you like to be the boss? Do you like to be in charge of projects?
No, but I do like to have some say in the projects.
Okay. Do you tend to be excessive in the things that you do?
That one's an interesting one because I think about like the time I'm spending delving into the Enneagram, and I would say that might be excessive. But I wouldn't say like I excessively exercise or I excessively study or yeah.
And then how attuned are you to unfairness or concerned with matters of justice?
Pretty concerned.
Okay. Can you give me an example of that?
With justice, I would say that if someone is wronged, I would become very concerned on how it's going to become right and how to make it right, and that it's seen out, so that if someone is hurt, I want to help them fix it and make it right.
And would you say you have more sensitivity to injustices with the weak and the vulnerable?
Absolutely, yes.
Such as animals, elderly,
seniors, children,
just vulnerable sector?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And how easy or difficult is it for you to be vulnerable or show weakness?
Again, if it's someone I trust and someone I'm comfortable with, I can be vulnerable and show weakness. But if I am untrusting or unknowing of the person, it is difficult for me to be vulnerable.
Okay. All right, you're doing great. All right. Is it usually easy for you to see many sides of an issue, or do you tend to identify strongly with one point of view?
Normally one point of view. Yeah.
Okay. And what is your experience of anger? Do you experience it? How often? What does it feel like if you express anger?
I do. I don't like feeling angry.
Okay.
It's not something I enjoy. Yeah.
But if you were to express anger, what would it look like?
It would be like a boiling pot. Like it would just kind of come up.
So
and
we
then
would
all of a
see
sudden,
it?
You would see it coming up. Like
Okay.
I actually, even color-wise, it comes up from like my chest up to my face, and I get angry, and then it just
And then it just explodes, the lid blows
Yeah.
off the pot?
and then I'm fine.
And then you're fine?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about conflict? How do you experience conflict? Would you avoid it? Would you move towards conflict?
I try to avoid it as much as possible. I like to soften things, but then again, like we were talking about the justice or for the vulnerable, I will stand up and cause some conflict just to make sure that people are.
And then how easy or difficult is it for you to say no to people? If someone asks you to do something at work or...
I can't say no.
It's difficult?
It's very difficult,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you have an example of that?
I will tend to take on more things than I have time for, and I'll still make sure to get it done, and then I will be the last person to have to make time for myself.
So a bit of self-forgetting?
Yeah, some self-forgetting. I think I have been working, like you were saying, over the last 3 years. I've been working to kind of grow and do some self-development, and I have been able to say no a little bit more often, especially if it's something that I don't want to do or I don't have time to do. But for the most part, I will say yes and help someone out or take on an extra project at work, or even my son, if his dad's sitting there not really doing anything and he wants a sandwich, I will put down whatever I'm doing and make the sandwich, just because, yeah.
And would you say that's from a place of wanting to keep the peace or not have conflict? Are you able to identify where the not saying no comes from? And if you don't,
Yeah,
that's okay.
and you know what? I actually think that it's from a performance perspective, is that I can get it all done. It's not from conflict.
So superwoman kind of complex. Okay.
So I guess that comes again to that weakness and that vulnerability. It's more, I want to get it all done and be able to get it done.
And look good doing it. Okay, here's a good next question then. Do you tend to put yourself ahead of others?
No.
Or do you tend to forget yourself?
I would say forget myself.
Okay. All right, I think you kind of gave an example of that. Okay, how self-critical are you?
I would say very.
Okay.
And I would say even the idea of you asking if I wanted to see what I looked like in the camera, I was like, absolutely not, because I would just criticize what I...
So before we went on to the camera, I asked Chairra if she wanted to see what the frame looked like and if she wanted to see herself, and she quickly said, absolutely not. Whereas I wanted to see, like, what does it look like? Do we need to stage anything differently? Okay, and would you say, just to ask a little bit more about that critical question, would you say that you have an inner critic? So all of us have an inner critic, but how much of the time do you feel like there's an inner critic operating in your brain?
I would say quite often, actually. To give an example, I remember popping in here one day and I had left a note for you on the car.
Yeah.
And you're like, who wrote this? And so I went home afterwards. And even though you said it was great and you really appreciated it, I was like, did she ask that because I didn't write something right? Did I misspell something?
Interesting.
And so that's just an example that stuck out recently, is that I'm like, did I write it correctly? Did I spell something wrong? Did she not like my writing?
So a second guessing.
Yeah, a second guessing or a, yeah.
Okay. And so how critical or judgmental would you say you are of others?
That's what I don't really want to answer, because it is, I would say, one of the flaws that I don't like about myself, that I've really seen come out during this COVID. Because
Do you have an example of that?
I had some neighbors that were all, when this first happened, all standing out on a driveway together within a foot or two of each other, probably 20 of them talking, and I'm like, do you see what they're doing? They shouldn't be doing that. That's not right. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's one thing, or that's probably the main thing, is that, yeah.
Do you take action with that?
No.
Did you go outside and like tell everybody to go back in the house?
No.
So it's just something that you're thinking from your own personal perspective. Okay.
Yeah. I don't often tell people when I don't think what they're doing is right, but I do voice it inside the house.
Okay. How important is it for you to be right?
I can accept when I'm not right.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary that I'm right, but because I can accept when I'm not, but.
And so when you set about accomplishing a task, do you have the sense that there's one right way to do it? And that you know that right way to do it?
I would say that I know how I think it should work. And that I have an idea. I am open to other ideas, but normally I'm like, well, why can't we try it this way first and then see? So.
And so same question, do you act on that? Do you act on, like if you think you have an idea, do you tell people?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah. When it comes to task-based things.
Okay. Would you describe yourself as a perfectionist?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have an example of that.
Tell me.
Recently, well, not recently, it's a couple of years ago now, I went back to school.
Yeah.
And if I did not get like 95 or more on my exams, I would go back to the instructor and be like, well, here's the reason why I thought this answer was this answer, and try and...
So you would challenge
it and try and get my marks changed, so...
And did it work?
Sometimes it did, actually.
Good for you. And And so would others who know you really well, would they also describe you as being a perfectionist?
Yes.
Okay. And what does this look like in practice? What does it look like, say, within your home, as an example?
So what that looks like is vacuuming every day, having things organized in a certain way inside the house, pulling weeds all the time, making sure that my front driveway is swept off. What else? Laundry is done.
And do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy the keeping of things looking good?
Not really. No, I've said like the worst part of when I had a day home was the cleaning of the house. Like I did not like it, but it was just something that I was driven to make sure like it was spotless every morning when kids came in, and
that might be something interesting to think about for you.
Yeah.
Is that if you're doing something out of habit, if you're doing something out of an unconscious knowing, and there's no joy, and there's no satisfaction out of doing the task, especially if it's something that you're doing every day, you might just wonder. That might be something to wonder about.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? And I'm putting in the effort, and what am I getting from it? So I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What is your experience of the rules? Do you follow them?
I would say for the most part.
Okay. And what about other people? Like, say someone's breaking the rules. Say they're standing out in their driveway and it's COVID and they're talking to people, or they're too close, and
That upsets me.
okay.
Yeah. But again, I don't do anything about it. It's just
You notice it.
I notice it though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then some people lean towards being really responsible or even over responsible. And then if there was a spectrum, others would go to, say, more carefree. Where would you be on that spectrum of being really responsible to being carefree?
I would say I'd be like an 8 on the responsible.
An 8 on the responsible
Yeah.
scale. Okay. You seem to know that right away. All right. How important is it for you to be liked by others?
I think it's not that important. And that I'm getting better with that over time as well.
Okay. And so would you say that's your whole life then?
Yeah. Yeah, and the longer the longer I am on the earth,
Okay.
the older I get, but
Good answer.
it seems to become less and less important.
Okay. And how central is it for you to help other people?
It's very important.
Okay. And then would you say your attention is focused more on yourself or more on other people? We kind of asked this question a little bit before, but how would you say you are in terms of helping others versus helping yourself?
Helping others, yeah.
Okay. And then some people have the ability to shapeshift depending on what is required of them in the moment or the need in the room or the environment. How adaptable are you to shape-shifting you to accommodate other people? How would you say alter how you are in a present moment to then spinning and turning to then helping someone else?
I think the only difference for like the shape shifting would be my level of comfort level with the people I was with. So people when they first meet me get a very different sense of who I am versus people who know me well or I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
I can be quite cold and shy and quiet and standoffish, withdrawn.
Yeah.
When I'm not comfortable in a situation or I don't know the people that I'm with, but I'm a lot different when I'm with people I know.
When the mask comes off.
Yeah, when the mask
there's
comes
a totally
off.
different person there. Okay, how important are goals to you?
Goals. Honestly, I'd have to say, even though they should be important, they're not.
Okay. And how important is image to you? Looking good.
That one's a tough one. I don't think it's that important. I mean, I want to look professional when I'm going to a professional meeting, or but most of the time it's not.
Is it more in a dutiful kind of a way?
Yeah.
Like, what does this environment ask of me, and then I'll show up for that, as opposed to looking good, like in a status or...
Absolutely. It's more of the dutiful way.
Okay.
If I go into the office, I should be dressed this way, and if I'm coming to the yoga studio, I'm dressed this way, and then when I'm at home, it doesn't matter.
I think one question that can be really helpful it's a really telling question, and it's not on here, I'm just kind of going off the script, but how comfortable are you wearing a uniform? Have you ever had to at different times in your life?
I have, and it hasn't
You're
really...
okay
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Or a name tag, or you're representing a larger group.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's cool with me, yeah.
Okay. How important is it for you to be perceived as successful?
It's not.
Okay.
I mean, well, wait a second. I guess the question would be like financially successful, or like life successful?
What does being successful mean to you?
Exactly. And I think that's where automatically I answered, because normally it's like monetarily and financially work related. It's important for me to be life successful, like happy and well-rounded and comfortable with the people I'm around, and yeah.
That's a great answer. What is the experience of failure for you?
Well, the perfectionist part of me has a hard time with failure. But I have had failures in the past that have just made me stronger. So, and just grown from it.
Okay. Can you give an example of when you set out to do something, it didn't go the way you expected, and maybe you perceived it to be a failure? What was that like in that time? Like over time, we can look back and say, oh yeah, that grew me and made me stronger in the moment of the initial failure. Do you have an example of how that made you feel?
I guess one thing would be, like I mentioned, I went back to school for recreation therapy, and I wanted to, when I got there, I wanted to get out and start working in long-term care and become a rec therapist, and there just wasn't any jobs at the time in that. And it actually ended up meaning that I ran the day home for an extra year, and it got me into a job that is just so satisfying and rewarding that, but at the time when I wasn't able to, it was, I remember reflecting and being like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I? Like, I had these marks, I can do this, why can't I? And it was hard, and it was more reflective of, like, it was very critical of myself. But then bounced back and grown from it.
And you've kind of moved on.
Yeah, I've moved on from it, and the way I look at it now is that it was meant to be the way it was, and the timing just wasn't right, and where I'm at now is great.
Okay. To what degree are you in touch with your emotions, your feelings?
I would say I can be in touch with my emotions and feelings, but I can also put them aside too. If I need to accomplish something or get something done and I'm having a sad day, it's kind of just like, okay, we're going to put that aside and we'll deal with that later on.
Okay. So would you say you have a wide range of emotions that you can use regularly?
Yes.
Okay. How easy or difficult is it for you to feel your feelings at a really deep level, beyond the surface?
I have to take the time to do that. Like, I have to...
It's conscious work?
Yeah, it's conscious work. I have to make the time. I have to sit with it. I wouldn't say it's something I would regularly do.
And how comfortable are you with really intense feelings or emotions?
Not great.
Okay. And then over your lifetime, what has been your experience of sadness? Is it something you feel frequently?
I don't. I would say like intense sadness would be the passing of my grandparents.
Like big life events?
Big life events. I would say that I don't. And if I do experience sadness, it's for a brief moment. That's for, maybe an hour or two, and then cry it out, and then and move on again.
Okay. And how much would you say that you compare yourself to others?
I don't think that I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jealous? And how important is authenticity to you?
Very important.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
I've often said that I have no time for people who are two-faced or put on a show or can't be authentic. If you ask my son what's the one thing that mommy doesn't like, he'll say liars. So that's something that just has been very ingrained with me, and I have, again, over this time, really distanced myself from people that are not authentic, because there's trust issue there.
I was just going to say, would you say authenticity is equivalent to trust?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it for you to express yourself authentically?
It's very important for me as well. Like I mentioned, I'm very cold and held back and withdrawn if I'm not comfortable, because I don't want to put on a different face. So I just keep quiet and don't express myself until I'm ready. And then when I am, it's the authentic full version of me. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How important is it for you to have privacy?
I would say over my lifespan, it has been very important. I don't divulge too much. Over the last little bit with growth, I wouldn't be here. Even 3 years ago, I wouldn't be here, because that would be giving away
too much self-disclosure.
Too much of my information and my personal right. But over the last little while, I've learned that I can only learn from other people, and if I expect that from other people, I need to do it as well.
That's one of the reasons why I so appreciate people coming on and doing this, because your vulnerability is only going, yes, it's vulnerable in the moment and at the time, but it's going to help someone else.
Right.
And I think I've learned that over the course of my life too, that, keeping things in is really just preventing others from sharing and growing along with us. So, yeah, I totally get that. So what about, how important or central is it for you to pay attention to managing your time, your space, and your energy level?
I would say it's not that important to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not aware of when you leave the house that you have a certain amount of energy to kind of
go
go throughout the day with, and okay. And would you say you were more of an observer or a participant?
That's a good one again. I can be both, depending on the situation and who I'm with.
Okay. And then how important is it to you to have access to knowledge and information?
I thought it was important to me, but the more that I've been studying and reading, and I've realized that it's only what I want from it that's important. So like I mentioned before, I was reading about the Enneagram, but I'm like, that's not me, I'm not reading about it. So I would say that the knowledge it's selective. Okay. It's not, I don't need to have the whole lot.
It's not like you're reading the latest literature on astrophysics or something. Okay, what role does fear play in your life? That's a really big question.
And that's one that I've been really working with lately, is how does it? But I don't have a lot of fear.
Okay. If you did, what kinds of things would they be around?
The safety of my loved ones.
Okay.
I know that that's something that...
Including yourself?
No, not myself. My safety is less important because I can look after myself.
Okay.
But yeah, my loved ones, I worry about their safety.
And how do you relate to authority?
If we have the same value set, I will respect authority. If not, I mean, I still remember even being in high school and being debating with teachers about the answers to things. I mean, I said that when I was in post-secondary as well. We actually had the conversation at home the other night about authority, and it came out that it's only if you guys have the same value sets that you respect the authority. Otherwise, you have a hard time. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's one of those things I didn't want to hear. But
so would you say that if you agree with the beliefs and the value of an organization or a person, you would be in flow with that?
Yeah.
But if you're not too sure,
then there's a wall.
There's no resistance there.
Yeah, and there's resistance
Okay.
for sure. Yeah.
Would you call yourself rebellious?
I wouldn't. No.
Okay. So you're not anti-authority?
No.
Okay.
No.
Are you slow to trust people, or do you trust easily?
Slow.
Okay. And how much focus do you place on forecasting potential problems?
I would say quite a bit. I mean, I will plan out things in my head.
Like what?
Like coming here and.
Okay.
You know.
I didn't give you very much information, so my first 2 interviews that I did, I sent them exactly what I was going to ask them, and I did not go off the script hardly at all, which is really, really hard for me, and I'm trying so hard to do that.
Yeah.
But for this, I didn't want to, and it didn't matter if it was you or anyone else,
Yeah.
I didn't want to give too many questions to you, because then you would think them out, right?
And I appreciate that when you sent me the
sent
text
you-
that said, this is what we're going to do, and I'm like, there's no questions.
I know there was like 3 things there, and I wanted you to trust that the answers are in you, right?
Yeah.
And you'll answer them from your own authentic spot. So I did that on purpose. So forecasting coming here.
Yeah, and just how that was going to go and what that was going to look like.
Am I going to say the right thing?
Am I going to say the right thing?
Yeah.
Am I going to go home and be like, oh no, I did that wrong? And then I will do the same thing. I'll do a spiral home going, what did I say? How did it go?
Right.
Probably judging different things that I said. But yeah, forecasting for sure. You know, if we have a trip coming up, I'm constantly planning and making sure that I've got what we need and where we're going and what time and what is the confirmation number with us and all that kind of stuff. So.
And so what would happen if, let's say you've planned something out and you've thought about it in your head and you've done all the troubleshooting around it. What would happen if the plan changed?
Oh, that would be awful.
Okay. What does that feel like for you?
I do get quite frustrated and angry. It is one of the trigger points for me for anger, for sure,
Okay.
is that if I have made plans and everything is set and ready to go and it changes, I'm like, okay, now what?
So it feels difficult to go with the flow when things are no longer the way you thought.
The way I thought it was.
Okay. Would you say you're a good troubleshooter?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an example of that?
We've been doing a lot of work around the house during this COVID and construction and stuff like that. And, you know, my husband likes to look at things a certain way, and all of a sudden I'll come in and I'm going like, well, why haven't we tried it this way? Or, and then all of a sudden it just clicks. Or I can come up with different, I know we talked about it before, but different, like, do I have one focus? I do have one focus, but I can see kind of other
ways
of doing it, and very logical in my thought process.
Okay, this is good information. Do you tend to doubt yourself?
That's interesting. Sometimes and sometimes not. It depends. It really depends. Like sometimes I'm like, yep, this is the answer. This is what I'm doing. And then other times I'll like go through it over and over and over again.
What if it's something that is new to you? Do you doubt yourself when you're new at something versus something that you've done with habitual pattern?
Yes. So as an example of that, I have a hard time going somewhere new by myself. I need to take someone who's been there before to kind of guide me through it, so that I'm comfortable with how we're going forward.
Okay. All right, we're going to leave it here for part 1 of this first episode. We're all hanging right now because I feel like the notes that I've written down, I think one thing and then I come back and I think another. And like I said earlier, ultimately this is your journey and your work. But I think we have some good information here. There's for sure a few that I feel comfortable eliminating, and I'm pretty sure Chairra would too. But tune in for the next episode and we'll see where this takes us.